Under the Oshodi Bridge, where traffic roared, an old woman in a tattered brown Ankara wrapper lay still on the sidewalk. People walked around her like she was a rock on the road. Yellow Danfo buses honked. Traders shouted prices. Nobody stopped. Amara, thin and small, with a simple dress and a school brochure folded in her bag, pushed through the crowd. "Mama, can you hear me?" she asked, kneeling. Her voice shook, but it was clear. She touched the woman's forehead. It was hot. The woman's lips were dry. Her breathing was weak and slow, as if each breath had to climb a hill. "Somebody help," Amara called. A few people turned. A few looked away. A man selling bottled water shook his head. "Leave her," he muttered. "People sleep under bridge every day." Amara ignored him. She put one arm under the woman's shoulders and one under her legs. She tried to lift. The woman was heavy, and Amara's arms trembled. She held on anyway. Across the service lane, a black Bentley sat by the curb, neat and quiet in the chaos. A tall man in an expensive navy blue caftan and red cap stood by the car. He watched the scene with eyes that carried both power and pain. His name was Johnson Obinna, CEO of a big company whose name sat on tall glass buildings. People knew him for his calm voice and brave choices. They did not know the hole in his life. His mother, missing for months without a trace. Johnson saw the small girl bend and try again. He saw her fail, then take a breath and try a third time. He felt something twist inside him. He crossed the road. "Let me help," he said, kneeling beside Amara. Amara did not look up to ask who he was. She did not ask for his name or money. She only said, "Please. She will die if we waste time." Together they lifted the woman. Amara's cheek pressed against the woman's grey hair. The woman's head rolled weakly on Amara's shoulder. A thin whisper slipped from her lips, so soft that only Amara heard it. "Chi, Lud." Amara's heart jumped. She held tighter. "You're safe, Mama," she said. "Stay with me." Johnson opened the back door of the Bentley and helped them in. "Drive," he told his driver, voice firm. "Closest hospital, now." As the car pulled into the flow of traffic, horns screamed. The city was a river of metal. The driver found a gap and slid into it. The Bentley surged forward. Inside, Amara held the woman's wrist the way she had seen nurses do when she once volunteered at a clinic. She counted in her head, 1, 2, 3, 4, feeling for a pulse that came and went like a weak drum. "She's burning," Amara said, eyes wet. "Please go faster." Johnson stared at the woman's face. He had seen many faces in his life, boardroom faces, fake smiles, hungry eyes that told him what he wanted to hear. This face pulled him like a magnet to a childhood memory. The high cheekbone, the small scar by the left eyebrow, the tiny gold earring shaped like a leaf. No, it could not be. Johnson leaned closer, almost afraid to know. He brushed away a strand of hair. His hand began to shake. "Stop the car," he said. The driver blinked. "Sir?" "Stop the car." They pulled to the side of the road. Cars screamed past. Danfo buses spit smoke. Johnson reached for the woman's chin and gently turned her face to the light. The afternoon sun touched her skin. He saw it, clear and sharp now. The scar by the eyebrow, the leaf earring, the small curve of her lip when she breathed out. His throat closed. He tasted salt. "Mama?" he whispered. Amara looked up, confused. "Sir?" Johnson's voice broke open like a door in the wind. She's my mother." The words hit the air like a bell. For a second, everything went quiet in Amara's head. The street noise faded, the dust floated. The heat did not touch her. She stared from the powerful man to the weak woman in her arms. "Your mother?" she asked, as if the word might vanish. Johnson swallowed hard. He nodded once. His eyes were wet. "Her name is Madame Sandra. She disappeared months ago. We searched every day." The driver turned in his seat, shocked. "Sir—" "Move," Johnson snapped, not in anger at the driver, but at time itself. "To the hospital, now." The car leapt back into traffic, and the city rushed around them. Amara felt the woman's breath slow again. She pressed 2 fingers to the woman's neck and counted. The pulse was a fading light. "Stay with me, Mama Sandra," Amara whispered. "Please stay." Johnson pulled out his phone. Prepare ER, he told someone at the hospital. Possible sepsis, dehydration, severe exhaustion. Intubation may be needed. I want blood tests ready, fluids, antibiotics, everything. Amara looked at him with surprise. You sound like a doctor, she said. I am not, he said softly, but I know what it feels like to be too late. They reached the hospital. The Bentley slid to the entrance, tires whispering on the smooth drive. 2 nurses and a doctor rushed out with a stretcher. The doors opened. Cold air wrapped around them. Amara did not let go until hands took the woman gently from her arms. The doctor checked the airway and called numbers Amara did not understand. A nurse lifted an IV bag. Another pushed the stretcher forward. Johnson and Amara ran beside them, step for step. Inside the bright ER, machines beeped. The air smelled like clean floors and sharp medicine. A nurse fitted an oxygen mask. The doctor pressed fingers to the woman's neck, checked her pupils, spoke fast. BP low, get a line in, start fluids, broad-spectrum antibiotics, now. Amara stood at the foot of the bed, chest rising and falling too fast. Her arms ached where they had carried the woman. Her dress had a grey stain from the bridge dust. She felt very small in that white, bright room. Johnson stood on the other side, steady and still, like a tree in a storm. But his eyes never left his mother's face. The monitors beeped slow, then slower. Her pressure is dropping, a nurse said. Push fluids, the doctor answered. Amara took 1 step closer. Mama Sandra, she said, voice shaking. It's me, the girl from under the bridge. You are safe. Your son is here. He is right here. The woman's eyelids fluttered, just a whisper of movement. She hears you, Johnson said, hope breaking through his fear. Keep talking. My name is Amara, the girl said. My mother taught me to be kind. Her voice broke. She swallowed. She died in a car crash with my father. I live alone in 1 small room. I don't have much. But I have 2 hands. I used them today for you. The doctor looked up at Amara with quick curiosity, as if her words were medicine too. He nodded to a nurse. Call ICU. Prepare a bed. Johnson stepped to Amara's side. Thank you, he said, the words deep and true. If you had walked past her like everyone else. I couldn't, Amara said. I just couldn't. The monitors beeped again. Beep, 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 finding a rhythm. The doctor let out a breath. Better, he said. Not safe yet. But better. Johnson's shoulders lowered a little, like a man laying down a heavy bag. He looked at Amara properly now, as if seeing her for the first time beyond the emergency. He noticed the school brochure peeking from her bag. He noticed a small pen mark on her wrist where she had written "Never give up" in tiny letters. What is your name again? He asked. Amara, she said. It means grace. It fits, he murmured. A nurse moved to the head of the bed. We're taking her for scans, she told them. You can wait outside. The stretcher rolled away. The doors swung shut. The busy sound of the ER wrapped around Amara and Johnson like wind around 2 people on a cliff. They stood in the hallway. For the first time since under the bridge, there was nothing to do but wait. Are you hungry? Johnson asked quietly. Do you need water? Amara shook her head. I'm fine. He gave a small half-smile that did not reach his eyes. I am not fine, he said, but I will be if she wakes up. Amara hugged her arms around herself. She will, she said. I believe it. Johnson stared at the floor, then at the doors, then at Amara. I have searched markets, bus parks, even small clinics, he said. I prayed in the night and told God I would give anything to see her again. Amara nodded. Maybe God sent me to pass there today. Maybe he did. Johnson took a slow breath. How old are you? 23, she said. I want to be a doctor one day. I read books at night. I try to learn from YouTube videos when I find data. She laughed once, a small sound. It is a funny dream when you can barely buy food. Johnson looked at her for a long second, a strange light in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, and the ER doors burst open. A nurse ran out, face tight. Sir, we need consent now, she said. She's crashing. We're losing her. If we don't intubate and push to ICU this minute, we may... The rest of the sentence crashed into a wave of alarms that spilled from the room behind her. a long, flat sound that made Amara's skin go cold and pulled Johnson back a step, like a hand to his chest. The nurse thrust a clipboard toward Johnson. "Sign." Johnson grabbed the pen, but his hand shook so badly the tip scratched the paper. Amara reached up and steadied his wrist with both her hands. He looked at her. She nodded once, firm. "Sign," she whispered. "Save her." Johnson wrote his name in one fast, jagged line. The nurse spun and ran. The doors flapped shut again. The alarm wailed, a hard, thin sound that turned the bright hallway into a tunnel. Amara and Johnson stood frozen, the air thick and still, the world holding its breath. And then, a sudden silence. Something heavy thumped against the door from the other side, like a body landing on a bed. A doctor shouted, "Tube in! Push! Now!" Amara's fingers dug into her own arms. Johnson's jaw clenched until a vein stood out on his neck. Neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. A single beep broke the silence. Then another, slow, stubborn, like a heart climbing back from a deep, dark well. The doors did not open. No one came out. Amara turned to Johnson, eyes wide. "Did we—" Before she could finish, a different sound rose behind them, quick footsteps, urgent voices, the click of high heels. A woman in a grey suit hurried down the corridor, 2 security men at her side. She stopped short when she saw Johnson and pressed a hand to her chest in shock. "Sir," she gasped, "you need to know. Someone just called the front desk, claiming that if Madame Sandra survives, they will come back to finish what they started." Amara's mouth fell open. Johnson's face turned to stone. The ER doors swung wide, doctors framed in bright light, sweat shining on their foreheads, and the lead doctor started to speak. Everything stopped on the edge of his next word. The doctor's voice trembled slightly, his face pale under the hospital lights. "She's alive," he said. "Barely, but someone injected her with a slow-acting poison. Whatever she took was meant to kill her quietly." Johnson froze. His hand, still clutching the edge of a chair, went numb. "Poison," he repeated. "Who would do that to her?" The doctor hesitated. "We don't know yet, sir, but whoever did it knew what they were doing. She was dehydrated, starved, and had traces of a sedative in her system. We've stabilized her for now, but she's not out of danger." Amara pressed a hand to her mouth. Her heart pounded. She looked at the billionaire, his face that once looked calm and powerful, now full of fear. "Sir," she whispered, "if you didn't come when you did—" Johnson turned to her, voice low but firm. "No. If you didn't stop to help her, she would have died under that bridge, alone." He turned to his bodyguard. "Increase the security at this hospital. No one goes near her room unless I approve it." The grey-suited woman who had brought the warning, Johnson's personal assistant, stepped closer. "Sir, should I alert the police?" Johnson nodded. "Yes. Quietly. No press, no leaks. If someone wanted her dead, they might still be watching." The assistant hurried away, heels clicking on the tile. Amara stood still, her eyes following her. For the first time, fear crept into her chest, not for herself, but for the fragile woman she had carried from the street. "Why would anyone want to harm your mother?" she asked softly. Johnson stared at the floor, then looked up at her, his eyes dark and heavy. "Because she knows things. Things some people would kill to hide." Night came quietly over Lagos. The hospital lights glowed against the glass walls like stars trapped in a jar. The corridors were quieter now. Nurses whispered as they passed. Amara sat on a plastic chair outside the ICU, her hands folded tightly. She hadn't eaten all day. Every sound made her flinch, the squeak of a wheel, the beep of a machine, the sound of rain starting outside. Johnson walked out of his mother's room, still wearing the same navy caftan. His face looked older now, tired but calm. He handed Amara a bottle of water. "You should drink," he said. She took it with a small smile. "Thank you, sir." He sat beside her, elbows on his knees. For a while, they didn't speak. Then Johnson said quietly, "I was 10 when my father died. My mother raised me alone. She used to sell food by the roadside, hot yam and palm oil. When I made my first million, I promised her she'd never have to work again." Amara listened silently. "One morning," he continued, "she left home for church and never came back. We searched everywhere. I even paid people to check morgues, shelters, under bridges. Nothing. I thought she was dead. Amara looked at him, her eyes soft. Maybe someone took her. Johnson nodded slowly. That's what I'm starting to think. They sat in silence again, broken only by the faint hum of machines. Then Amara asked, "Do you believe in destiny, sir?" Johnson glanced at her. "I used to. Now, maybe I'm starting to again." Just then, a nurse came out of the ICU. "She's awake," she said. Johnson and Amara both stood at once. "Can we see her?" Johnson asked. The nurse nodded. "Only for a few minutes. She's weak." Inside the ICU, the room was bright but peaceful. The air smelled of medicine and lavender sanitizer. On the bed lay Madame Sandra, her eyes half open, her skin pale but alive. A soft hum came from the oxygen line beside her. When Johnson stepped closer, her eyes widened, tears welling up. "My son," she whispered, her voice faint. Johnson's throat tightened. He took her hand and pressed it to his cheek. "Mama, I thought I lost you." Madame Sandra smiled weakly. "You didn't lose me. You just stopped looking in the right place." Amara stood quietly at the corner, watching the moment unfold. Tears filled her eyes. Sandra turned her gaze toward her. "Is she the one?" Johnson nodded. "Yes, Mama. She found you under the bridge. She carried you herself." Sandra's lips trembled. "Come here, my child." Amara stepped closer, unsure. Sandra reached out her frail hand and touched her face. "Bless you," she whispered. "You brought me back when I was already gone." Johnson watched them silently, a deep emotion rising in his chest he couldn't name. But before the warmth could settle, the heart monitor beside Sandra's bed beeped sharply. Once, twice, then it began to rise and fall erratically. "Doctor!" the nurse shouted. Johnson's heart lurched. "What's happening?" "She's reacting to something. Blood pressure dropping fast." A team of doctors rushed in. They moved with practiced speed, checking her airway, injecting medication, adjusting the oxygen flow. Amara backed up against the wall, fear written all over her face. Johnson held her shoulder, eyes locked on his mother's still body. The chief doctor barked an order. "Call security now. Someone replaced her IV line." "What?" Johnson shouted. One of the nurses pulled out a syringe. "This isn't from our supply," she said. "It's been tampered with." Amara's legs shook. "You mean someone came in here?" The doctor didn't answer. The security guard at the door spoke into his radio, voice urgent. "Lock down all exits. Nobody leaves this floor." The machine screamed again, louder this time. Johnson stepped forward, gripping his mother's hand. "Stay with me, Mama, please." Her lips moved faintly. "Don't trust." Then her eyes rolled back. The doctor's voice cut through the chaos. "We're losing her again." Johnson stood frozen, helpless, as alarms filled the room. Amara could only whisper through her tears, "Not again. Please, not again." Outside, footsteps ran through the corridor, but this time someone wasn't running toward the ICU. They were running away. The hospital alarm screamed through the corridor like a siren from another world. Code blue in ICU." Amara's knees went weak. Nurses and doctors rushed past her, white coats flying like wings. Johnson stood frozen by the doorway, his hand still clenched around the doorframe, his chest rising fast and uneven. Inside the room, the doctor was shouting orders. "Adrenaline! Clear the airway! Check the IV line again!" And the steady hum of machines turned into a war of beeps and cries. "Sir, please wait outside," a nurse said, but Johnson didn't move. He couldn't. His mother's pale hand had just fallen lifelessly to the side of the bed. Amara grabbed his arm. "Sir, come. Please. You'll only make it worse." Her voice, small but firm, broke through his panic. He stepped back, his face pale. Together they stood in the hallway, waiting, again, for life or death to make its choice. Minutes passed like hours, and then silence. The alarms stopped. The doors swung open. The lead doctor came out, his gloves stained with faint traces of medicine. "She's stable again," he said, voice trembling from exhaustion. "We found a second dose of the toxin. Someone switched her line while she was sedated." Johnson's jaw tightened. His hands balled into fists. I want every camera in this hospital reviewed, now. We already started, said his security chief, walking briskly toward him. We found something on the CCTV from 20 minutes ago. The man handed Johnson a tablet. On the screen was grainy footage from a hallway camera, a nurse entering Madame Sandra's room with her head down. But when the figure lifted her face toward the camera, Amara gasped. That's not one of the hospital nurses, she whispered. The woman in the footage wore a nurse's uniform, but her eyes were sharp, cold, and familiar. Too familiar. Johnson zoomed in. Wait, he said, his voice hardening. I've seen her before. He paused, memories flashing through his mind, the day his company exposed a corruption scandal, the woman who had vanished after stealing millions from the company's charity arm. Her name had been Patience, but everyone thought she had fled abroad. Find her, Johnson said through clenched teeth. Search every ward, every exit, every car. The guards moved instantly. Hours later, the hospital was on lockdown. Police cars lined the street outside. The news hadn't broken yet. Johnson made sure of that. He stood by the window in his mother's private room, the city lights reflecting on the glass. Amara sat in a chair nearby, watching Madame Sandra sleep peacefully for the first time. The oxygen tube rose and fell gently with each breath. She looks peaceful, Amara whispered. Johnson nodded without looking at her. She always did, even when the world was falling apart. There was a pause. The hum of the monitor filled it. Then he turned to Amara. I need to ask you something. She met his eyes, nervous. Yes, sir? When you found her, did you see anyone around her? Anyone watching? Amara thought hard. No, just people walking past. A few looked, but no one stopped. There was one man, though. Johnson straightened. What man? He was standing far away, near a black SUV. I thought he was just waiting for a bus, but... She frowned, remembering. He had dark glasses on, and he kept looking at the woman, at Mama Sandra. Johnson took a step closer. Could you recognize him if you saw him again? Amara hesitated. I think so. He exhaled. Good. Because whoever they are, they didn't want her to live, and now they know she's here. The thought sent a chill down Amara's spine. But why her, she asked. She's so gentle. She doesn't even know me, yet she smiled at me. Johnson looked out the window again. She was the only one who knew the truth about my father's death, he said quietly. Everyone thought it was a car accident. But my mother never believed that. She said someone wanted him gone. Amara's eyes widened. So they tried to silence her too. Yes, Johnson's voice hardened. And now they'll realize they failed. Midnight. The rain had started again. It fell softly against the window, wrapping the city in grey silence. Amara couldn't sleep. She sat on the small sofa in the corner of the room, watching the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. She had never been in a place so cold and yet so full of hope. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the power went out. The backup generator kicked in immediately, but the lights dimmed lower, and the hum of the machines changed tone. Amara stood. Sir? Johnson looked up from his phone, eyes narrowing. That's not normal. He walked to the wall and pressed the nurse call button. No response. Amara's stomach twisted. Do you think... A sudden crash echoed from the hallway. A tray hit the floor. Then the sound of running footsteps. Johnson moved instantly. Stay here, he told Amara. He stepped out of the room, the corridor dim and shadowed. A nurse ran past him, terrified. Someone broke into the security office, she shouted. The cameras are down. Johnson's phone buzzed, a message from his security chief. Unknown movement detected in restricted wing. Possible intrusion. He turned sharply. The restricted wing was on the same floor, just a few rooms away. Back in the room, Amara stood by the bed, fear crawling up her spine. She looked at Madame Sandra, still unconscious. The oxygen tube hissed softly. Then she heard it, a slow creak from the window. Her eyes darted there. The curtain moved slightly. Sir, she whispered. No answer. She took a step closer. The curtain moved again, and before she could call out, a hand shot through, gripping the edge of the window frame. Amara screamed. Johnson burst back into the room just as the figure tried to climb in. A man in black clothes, face half covered. He carried a small syringe in his hand. Johnson lunged forward, grabbing the man by the collar. The two men struggled, knocking over a tray. The syringe clattered to the floor and rolled under the bed. Amara froze, heart racing, then dropped to her knees and reached for the syringe. She grabbed it before the man could, clutching it tight in her hand. Johnson punched the intruder once, hard, and the man stumbled back toward the open window. But before he could escape, security guards burst in, weapons drawn. "Don't let him go," Johnson shouted. The man jumped through the window, landing on the metal canopy below. The guards fired a warning shot, but he vanished into the rain. Amara was shaking, still clutching the syringe. Johnson turned to her, his face pale with adrenaline. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No, but look." She handed him the syringe. Inside was a faint golden liquid. Johnson frowned. "That's not hospital medication." Amara's voice trembled. He wanted to inject her with it. He looked at the syringe again, his mind racing. "Then this isn't over." He turned to his security team. "Lock down every exit. No one leaves this building until we find out who sent him." Amara looked at Madame Sandra, then at Johnson. Her voice was small but steady. "Sir," she said, "whoever's doing this, they know you're here too." Johnson met her eyes. And for the first time that night, there was something different in his gaze. Not just fear, but the realization that Amara wasn't just a witness anymore. She was part of the story, and whoever wanted Madame Sandra dead had just seen Amara's face. Rain poured through the night like a curtain of silver. The sound filled every corner of the hospital as if heaven itself mourned what almost happened. Amara sat quietly in the corner of Madame Sandra's hospital room, wrapped in a grey blanket a nurse had given her. Her hand still trembled from the chaos. Every time she blinked, she saw the man's eyes, the cold stare of someone who had come to kill. Johnson stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear. "Seal all surveillance records. I don't want the press touching this, not until we know who's behind it." His voice was calm, but the tremor underneath betrayed the fear in his heart. "Yes, Inspector Felix, I'll expect you before sunrise." He ended the call and turned to Amara. "The police will be here soon. They'll take your statement." Amara nodded silently, her voice gone. For a moment, Johnson studied her. The same girl who had lifted his dying mother in her arms now looked small and frightened, yet there was something fierce in her eyes, a quiet strength. He walked closer. "You did well tonight," he said softly. Amara looked up. "I didn't do anything. You're the one who fought him." "You grabbed the syringe before he could use it," Johnson replied. "You saved her again." Her eyes glistened. "Why are they doing this, sir? What did your mother ever do to them?" Johnson's jaw tightened. He lowered his voice. "Before my father died, he was investigating a group inside my company. People stealing from a charity fund meant for widows. He never got to expose them. Then, he had an accident. My mother knew the truth. She refused to stay silent." Amara's breath caught. "So they tried to make her disappear too." He nodded grimly. "And now that she's alive again, they'll do anything to finish the job." Silence filled the room. The machines hummed softly beside Madame Sandra's bed, a slow rhythm of life returning. Amara whispered, "You should go home, sir. You haven't rested." Johnson shook his head. "I'm not leaving her. Or you." Amara blinked. "Me?" He turned toward her fully, his gaze steady. "They saw your face, Amara. You're a witness. That means you're in danger too." Her lips parted, but no words came out. A faint wave of fear swept through her. "I'll be careful," she murmured. Johnson stepped closer. "Careful isn't enough. I'm taking you somewhere safe." "But sir," "No argument," he said firmly. "You risked your life for my mother. Let me protect yours." Later that night, the rain eased into a soft drizzle. The hospital corridor smelled of disinfectant and damp clothes. Johnson's security team surrounded them as they stepped into the elevator. Amara wore one of the nurse's spare coats to hide her identity. Madame Sandra had been moved to a secure private suite, guarded by 2 officers. "Where are we going?" Amara asked quietly. "My home," Johnson said. "It's the safest place right now." The elevator doors opened to the underground parking lot. The black Bentley waited, engine humming. As they entered, Johnson's driver nodded. "Sir, route cleared. Escort vehicles ready." The car rolled out into the Lagos night, escorted by 2 SUVs. Streetlights flashed across Amara's face, casting soft shadows. She stared out the window, watching puddles reflect the city's glow. "I've never been inside a car like this," she said softly. Johnson smiled faintly. "You'll get used to it." "I don't think I want to," she whispered. "I like walking. You see people better that way." He looked at her quietly for a moment, realizing how different they were. She lived in simplicity, yet she had more courage than anyone he knew. By 3 a.m., they reached Johnson's residence in Banana Island, a sprawling white mansion with marble columns and tall palm trees waving gently in the wet wind. The gates opened automatically, revealing the courtyard glistening under the rain. As the car stopped, Amara hesitated. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. Johnson opened the door for her. "You should," he said simply. "You're the reason my mother is still alive." They stepped inside. The house was silent except for the distant hum of the generator. The interior gleamed with soft gold lights, crystal chandeliers, and walls lined with paintings. Amara looked around, eyes wide. "It's beautiful," she said, almost in awe. "Like a dream." Johnson smiled. "Dreams are built by those who refuse to give up." He led her to a guest room, soft cream walls, white sheets, and a faint scent of jasmine. "You can rest here. If you need anything, press that button," he said, pointing to the intercom. Amara hesitated by the door. "Thank you, sir." "For everything." He met her eyes, his voice gentler now. "It's I who should thank you." Their eyes lingered a little too long before Johnson turned and left. Amara lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, the events replaying in her head. The woman under the bridge, the hospital fight, the man's cold eyes. And now this house, this quiet space that didn't feel real. Sleep came slowly, wrapping her in fragile peace. The sound of birds woke her, sunlight streamed through the curtains. She sat up, dazed, until she remembered where she was. There was a knock. "Come in," she said softly. A maid entered with a tray of breakfast, tea, bread, and fruit. "Good morning, Ma," she said respectfully. "Ma?" Amara laughed lightly. "I'm not Ma, I'm just Amara." The maid smiled shyly. "Oga say make I serve you like madam." Amara blinked. "Madam?" Before she could reply, Johnson appeared at the doorway. Dressed in a black suit, freshly shaven, his red cap neatly placed. He looked different in daylight, calmer, yet the lines of worry still marked his eyes. "How did you sleep?" he asked. "Like someone who borrowed peace for a night," she replied. He smiled faintly. "Good. My mother woke up for a few minutes this morning. She's weak, but she asked about you." Amara's face lit up. "She did?" "She said you should come see her when it's safe." Amara smiled, her heart swelling with relief. "Thank God." Johnson nodded. "And thank you." She hesitated. "Sir, may I ask something?" "Of course." "Why are you helping me this much? You barely know me." He looked at her for a long time before answering. "Because you remind me of what I almost lost, the kind of goodness money can't buy." Her eyes softened, but before she could speak, a phone rang sharply. Johnson's smile vanished. He answered, voice low. "Hello?" A pause, his eyes darkened. "What?" he snapped. "Repeat that." Amara's chest tightened. "What's wrong?" Johnson ended the call and looked at her grimly. "The police caught the man from the hospital. He's talking." "Who sent him?" Johnson's expression hardened. "A name I never thought I'd hear again. Chief Kelvin." "Who's that?" He exhaled slowly, anger simmering beneath his calm voice. "My father's old business partner, the man who claimed to help us after the accident, the same man who took over the company until I came of age." Amara frowned. "You mean—" "Yes," Johnson interrupted quietly. "The man who called himself family. He tried to kill my mother. And now he knows you're alive too." The words hung heavy in the room. Amara's fingers gripped the bedsheet. "So he'll come after me." Johnson nodded once. "That's why you can't go anywhere alone. Not now. Not until this ends." She swallowed hard, fear mixing with disbelief. "What if he tries again?" Johnson's eyes met hers. This time his voice was steady, cold, and full of quiet power. Then he'll learn what happens when you touch the only person I can't afford to lose. Amara's breath caught, her heart skipping. Something in the way he said it, protective, fierce, and unshakably real, made her chest tighten. The silence stretched between them until the distant sound of thunder rolled outside, low and foreboding. Neither of them knew that the next storm wasn't just in the sky, it was already on its way to the mansion. The mansion was silent except for the whisper of rain against the windows. Amara stood by the living room window, staring out at the dark sky. The world felt too quiet, as if it was holding its breath for what would come next. Johnson entered, his phone in his hand, face hard and unreadable. "Chief Kelvin has agreed to meet," he said at last, "but he doesn't know I know everything yet. He thinks I just want to talk business." Amara turned. "Isn't that dangerous?" "It is," he said, putting on his jacket, "but this ends tonight. I'm coming with you." He blinked, surprised. "No, Amara. You've done enough. It's too risky." She stepped closer, eyes steady. "If not for me, your mother wouldn't be alive. Let me help you keep her that way." There was no fear in her voice, just quiet strength. Johnson hesitated, then nodded slowly. "All right, but you stay close to me." Chief Kelvin's mansion sat on the outskirts of Victoria Island. Tall iron gates, long drive, walls covered in climbing plants. Everything looked peaceful, but the peace was fake. As Johnson's car stopped at the gate, two guards approached. One recognized him immediately and opened the gate without a word. Inside, the lights glowed warmly, yet something about them felt cold. Kelvin appeared on the staircase, smiling, a tall man in his 60s, sharp grey beard, dressed in white agbada and gold wristwatch. "Ah, Johnson," he called. "It's been years." Johnson forced a polite smile. "Too many." Kelvin's eyes flicked to Amara, and this must be the girl from the hospital news. "Brave child. You saved his mother, eh?" Amara nodded cautiously. "Yes, sir." Kelvin gestured grandly. "Come, come. Let's talk like family." They followed him into a large sitting room lined with portraits. One of the photos caught Amara's eye, Johnson's father, smiling proudly beside a younger Kelvin. Kelvin poured wine and laughed. "Ah, your father and I built everything from scratch. I still remember the day we bought our first truck. We didn't have much, but we had trust." Johnson's eyes darkened. "Trust," he repeated softly. "A word you've used many times." Kelvin chuckled. "Of course, without trust, what are we?" Johnson leaned forward. "Maybe murderers." The laughter died. Kelvin's hand froze mid-air. "Excuse me?" Johnson's voice turned cold and sharp. "My mother is alive, Kelvin. She remembered everything. The bribe, the sabotage, the night you tampered with my father's car." Kelvin's jaw clenched, but his tone stayed smooth. "You've been misled. You know how grief twists memory." Amara spoke quietly. "We found the syringe at the hospital. The man you hired told the police everything." Kelvin turned to her, his charm slipping for the first time. "And what does a little street girl know about business or truth?" Amara's heart pounded, but she didn't back down. "Enough to know you paid someone to kill a woman who only ever helped you." Kelvin's face hardened completely now. "Watch your tongue, girl." Johnson rose slowly, his voice controlled but heavy with fury. "You stole from our charity fund. My father found out. You killed him to cover it up. And when my mother refused to stay silent, you tried to finish her too." Kelvin stood, nostrils flaring. "Careful, Johnson. You have no proof." Johnson's lips curved into a bitter smile. "Actually, I do." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. "Your accountant, Mr. Olanier, kept backups of all your transactions. He came to me this morning." Kelvin's mask finally broke. "You don't know what you're doing," he shouted, his calm voice cracking. "That money built this city." "No," Johnson said quietly, "it built your lies." Amara's eyes widened. The door behind them opened suddenly. Two of Kelvin's guards stepped in. "Sir?" one asked. Kelvin waved a hand. "Get them out." Before the guards could move, Johnson's own men appeared from the hallway, guns drawn. "Nobody moves." Kelvin's eyes darted between them, shock replacing rage. You brought police? Johnson nodded once. I brought justice. Outside, blue lights flashed, sirens wailed as officers flooded the compound. Chief Kelvin turned pale. Johnson, listen to me. Your father, he was going to ruin us both. I did what I had to do. Johnson's voice trembled, but he stood firm. And I'll do what I have to do now. The police stepped forward, reading Kelvin his rights. His voice rose in panic. You think you're clean, boy? You'll drown in your mother's truth. As they dragged him away, Amara stood frozen, watching the man who had destroyed so many lives disappear into the flashing lights. When silence returned, Johnson exhaled deeply, the weight of years falling off his shoulders. It's over, Amara said softly. He turned to her, eyes glistening. Because of you. Weeks later, the hospital smelled of lilies and fresh paint. Madame Sandra sat in a wheelchair by the window, wrapped in a light shawl, smiling as sunlight touched her face. Amara entered the room carrying flowers. Good morning, Mama Sandra, she said warmly. The old woman smiled. My child, come sit with me. Amara knelt beside her. How are you feeling? Alive, Sandra whispered, because you refused to walk away. She touched Amara's hand gently. You remind me of my younger self, strong, kind, stubborn. Johnson walked in quietly, carrying a small box. Mama, are you ready? Sandra looked up. For what? Johnson smiled and turned to Amara. For this. He opened the box. Inside lay a small golden stethoscope pendant on a silver chain. Amara gasped softly. It's beautiful. It's yours, he said. I spoke with the university. Your admission has been approved. You'll study medicine, full scholarship. That was your dream, right? Tears filled her eyes. Sir, I can't. It's too much. It's the least I can do, Johnson said, voice soft. You didn't just save my mother. You saved me. Sandra reached out and took both their hands, her voice trembling. I always prayed my son would find someone who truly saw people. Not money, not power, just hearts. She smiled faintly. Now I see her. Amara's heart raced, unsure what she meant. Johnson squeezed her hand gently, their eyes meeting in quiet understanding. 2 years later, the sky over Lagos was clear and golden. The sound of violins filled the grand church hall. Rows of guests smiled and whispered as the bride walked down the aisle. Amara, in a white gown glowing under the light, held a bouquet of lilies. Beside her, Madame Sandra, strong again, walked proudly, tears streaming down her face. At the altar stood Johnson, dressed in white agbada, his eyes fixed only on her. When she reached him, he whispered, The day you lifted my mother from that bridge, you lifted my whole world too. Amara smiled through her tears. And you gave me one. As the priest began to speak, the crowd fell silent. No longer the billionaire and the orphan, but two souls who found grace in the place everyone else ignored. When he said, You may kiss the bride, the hall erupted in cheers. Madame Sandra clapped her hands, whispering with joy, The girl who saved my life has become my daughter. And outside, beneath the bright Lagos sky, the wind carried their laughter, a reminder that kindness, once given, always finds its way home. If you like this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.